Handling some reptiles can be a little bit sketchy. Is this thing gonna bite me? Does this thing think that I'm food? Why is this thing hissing at me? And today we're gonna go over how you can handle even the most hungry or the most defensive reptiles. I'm Adam. This is Pikachu. You're watching Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles. Stick around. Before we even begin, this video has nothing to do with venomous reptiles. So everything that I'm telling you right now, if you're thinking about venomous reptiles, I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. I have zero clue. This does not pertain to them, but let's move on. Now, there are a few reasons why a reptile might be defensive, a snake or a gecko or a lacerda or whatever. And a few of those reasons, maybe they're really hungry. And that's the only reason they'd ever be aggressive. Let's clear that up. Most reptiles are never really aggressive. They're defensive. Big difference. If they're hungry and they think that you're food, then yeah, they're aggressive. They are opportunistic hunters most of the time. Like my boy Pikachu, whose head is somewhere behind me there, he's a ball python. He lays in waits, or sometimes he'll prowl around, but he generally will eat when he gets the opportunity to, and pythons do that a lot in the wild. So yeah, they're gonna be aggressive. If they think you're food, that's it, lights out, they're gonna go after you. But in almost every other circumstance, animals are defensive. They're not aggressive or even mostly territorial. Sometimes that's the case, but I mean, that's reserved for if they're breeding or if they're laying on eggs. Like a lot of the times, a ball python, a female, who's laying on eggs, or sometimes even if they're in with a partner, they don't want you to mess with them. So then they might be a little bit aggressive, but still that's defensive to me because they're protecting what's theirs, just like you would do with your young child. They're called children, they're humans. Another reason, maybe they're in shed. If they're in shed, that means, well, they're in blue is another way to say it, and they've got this film over their eyes, so they can't see very well. So of course they're gonna feel a little bit more defensive, feel a little bit more vulnerable perhaps. So that's a reason why they might be defensive as well. And lastly, maybe they're not handled that much and they just don't like you touching them. You know, some animals just don't want to be touched. And there's certain species that are much harder to handle or much less likely to be okay with being handled than others. Ball pythons, the reason I have ball pythons in a lot of the videos, look, ma, no hands. Like, I don't have to worry about him going anywhere or like being crazy. I wouldn't handle Bob, my jeweled lacerda. I mean, ever, but especially for a video because when I got him, he had metabolic bone disease. He's never been handled, so he's not cool with being touched at all. Some of the signs, hissing or striking at you, if it's a hognose snake, maybe like a faint strike with the mouth closed, but a lot of the times it's gonna be hissing, or with leopard geckos, screaming. I know no one really is scared of leopard geckos, but just as an example, because I've got one. And that's only when they're babies normally. A lot of the times, neonates, babies, juveniles will be a little bit more defensive than adults, but then they'll grow out of it, and then you don't have to worry about it once they get to adults. I've never really had this issue with like a ball python, for example. I've been very lucky where ball pythons are generally pretty cool. So if they're hissing at you, one way that you can take care of this is, first of all, make sure that they know that you're not food. I mean, this goes if they're hissing or not, and generally, actually, to be honest, if they're hissing at you, they probably know that you're not food because they're not gonna hiss at food and say, get away from me. They wanna eat the food. So if you've got even a little bit of an inkling that they might think you're food, or even if they are hissing at you, just kind of poke them, let them know, hey, I'm here, first of all. Second of all, it's a food thing, let them know I'm not food. And I suggest using a hook for this. Hooks are relatively cheap. There's no reason really not to have one. Get one that is at least half the length of the snake's body, because that's generally how big their strike range is. And you'll know, I mean, most of the time with a lot of species, like ball pythons, for example, corn snakes, they'll be looking at you. Corn snakes will sometimes rattle their tail at you. Ball pythons will hiss. Burmese pythons will hiss, things like that, before they lunge at you. Now, things like Kenyan sand boas, or even my BCI, my boa, she will, I mean, just kind of strike out of nowhere. Normally this is a food thing, but sometimes they can strike sideways defensively as well. And I mean, just so we can stop talking about if it's a food thing or not, never have food in the room. Like today is feeding day. It is 8 o'clock at night. Normally I feed around this time, but because I want to do this video for you and have Mr. Pikachu, who is so darn handsome, I mean, look at his little face. I wanted to make sure that I just kind of waited because I don't want to have food in the next room. because if I do, he might smell it, he might think I'm food, and then this is gonna be a different video of me screaming. Like, I don't know, I don't wanna scream, it's weird. If you like this video so far, I'd appreciate it. Bam, hit that subscribe button, hit like, and we'll move on to the next thing here. So make sure there's no food in the room. Now let's get to the nuts and bolts of this, how to actually pick these things up without getting bit. What I suggest to do is go behind them, always. So if they're kind of like zoning in on you and you think they might, you know, try to take a piece of you, show with one hand over here or the hook or whatever, and then scoop underneath behind them. Now I got my sister to help me with this video, so the tattooed chick, that's who's helping right now, just because it's harder to film like snakes that are trying to get away from you. So this is how you do it basically. You can just kind of scoop from behind and then handle very confidently. I always suggest that as well. Go in there super confidently. Don't kind of, you know, beat around the bush and just go in there, be super confident about it, and let them know that, hey, if you try to take a stab at me, try to nip at me, try to bluff strike at me, it's not gonna deter me. I'm gonna pick you up. It's the same thing with, I don't know, this parrot that bites my ear, and I'm supposed to not do that, but I just don't like when things bite my ear, man. Just a little trick or a hack is like some of you like to say, I use hand sanitizer, just real quick. A trick if a python or a snake bites you and doesn't let go is to put hand sanitizer like around their mouth area or alcohol or something to get them to let go. So I figure if my hands smell like sanitizer, well, like why would they think that they're food in the first place? That's, I don't know, the thinking behind it. And some people have told me this works for things like king snakes, which are more apt to bite than anything else. So I figure, hey, I mean, if it works for king snakes, it'll probably work for pythons too. Now, what about the little guys? Like, you don't want to hold your babies. How else are they going to get used to you? Confidently. That's how you do it. Now, colubrids, like this milk snake here, who we have named, I guess we're going to name her yesterday. Okay, well, I guess I'll tell you what the name was. Beatrice here. She's kind of crazy. She's a little bit flighty, but you hold her carefully, not too tight, you support her body, let her kind of wriggle around you, and when they're this small, if they're gonna bite you, it's probably not gonna hurt. So if you're cool with that, I mean, Beatrice doesn't try to strike, which is cool, but little corn snakes sometimes will, and little ball pythons or boas, or if you're a boa, they don't come from eggs, of course, but I mean, when they're babies, sometimes they'll try to just strike at you. I mean, just, if you can take it, if you're comfortable taking it, just do. It teaches them right away that this is not gonna make this guy leave me alone. I'm gonna get held today. Now with lizards, just be careful, because most snakes are, all that I know of, their tails don't detach. Some lizards, like this little baby leopard gecko, the tail will come off if you try to squeeze it. So this one is usually pretty defensive. I couldn't get her to strike for the filming of this video, but a lot of the times she'll just strike at you, she'll do the scream thing. Just be confident about it. It doesn't hurt when a leopard gecko, a baby leopard gecko bites you, you barely even know what happens. And it's also really uncommon, so just because I'm talking about bites, like it's not a common thing, I'm just saying if that happens, I mean, don't worry about it. It's, look how cute. Control the head is the other thing too. Make sure that you're always controlling the head and you know where the sharp end of the snake is. I'm talking to you, I'm looking at you, right in your face. But I'm also making sure I know where his head is. He is never lashed out, knock on wood, bad time to say it when you got one in your hands. But if that were to happen, if that was gonna happen, I wouldn't want it to be my face or somewhere precious, you know? So I just make sure that I know where the sharp end is, and same thing with lizards, and make sure you know the strike range as well. Snakes generally about half the length of their body. Most snakes that you have in captivity that aren't venomous can't double back on themselves. Now, some elapids can, but I mean, that's a venomous snake. So you just kind of be a little bit smart with the way they move, study the way the snake moves, and you'll have a good idea of if you're in the danger zone or the safe zone. But be confident, and that's it. I know I talk to you all the time about Franny the boa constrictor. I mean, look at her. She's so cool. She hissed at us for a little bit, and then we just went in there aggressively, not aggressively, but confidently, and picked her up. Just be gentle with her, and she was super cool. Like, the only reason I don't have her out is because, I mean, the freezer, I opened the freezer and I did put some rats in a bucket. They're upstairs, but she's got the most incredible food response, and I mean, don't get bit. You don't want to be on the business end of a boa constrictor. Trust me. And just before I let you go, if they're zoning in on you, change orientation, right? So if I got Pikachu here, and like, let's suppose that you're there, just kind of spin them around, and it kind of disorients them a little bit, and generally they'll stop and look somewhere else. Just a little bit at a time when you're handling these animals, just a little bit, each day or every other day. Don't handle them after you feed them. Give them 24 to 48 hours, of course. And that's it. Just be gentle, be respectful at all times. So there you go. That's how you handle defensive or really any reptile. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. The reason I did the video is because several of you asked for this exact video. I always take the topic out of the suggestions below. So, I mean, what should I talk about next week? Throw it down there. If you want to see more of my personal collection, bam, there's the Instagram feed, and you should also hit subscribe while you're down there. And, well, because I do videos twice a week, that means see you on Monday.